Welcome back to CareerCon, everyone. I am Jessica, and I am here with someone you've probably all seen right here on YouTube before. Siraj Raval, popular YouTube machine learning educator and director of the School of AI, as well as Rachael Tatman, our very own prominent data scientist and developer advocate at Kaggle. They're both here to talk about how people such as yourselves can build an online brand even if self-promotion isn't something you're used to or comfortable with. They will also share how having an online presence can help you reach your career goals. Suraj is going to share his experience first. Take it away, Suraj.
Thanks, Jessica. It's good to be here. Thanks, everybody, for showing up. It's an honor to be here with Kaggle and with you guys. So I thought more than anything, what I could do to help you out is to just give you an overview of my YouTube journey so far. For context, 3 years ago, I was working at a company in San Francisco called Twilio, which offers a communications API to developers. And my role there was to be a developer educator. So what I was doing was I was writing developer documentation in about 8 or 9 different programming languages like PHP and Python. And it was a lot of work for sure. And I learned a lot in that time. I was there for about 8 months. And one thing that I learned in particular was that there wasn't enough developer documentation in video form. And there were a lot of, at the time, 3 years ago, YouTube wasn't, I mean, it was big, obviously, but it continually grows every year. And at the time, there just wasn't enough. So I saw an opportunity to start creating educational content around, specifically around, my first video was on Bitcoin. But my passion was in artificial intelligence, a field that I took some classes at Columbia, which I dropped out, by the way. I'm a college dropout. I took some classes, but I never, and I felt like I never really processed it fully. Like I saw the equations, I saw the slides, and I got the high level concepts, but I didn't really get the math, to be honest. And so what I started doing was I started making videos on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And what I found was that by making these tutorials, I was learning much faster than I would just like staring at a blog post or staring at a textbook. And so for me, creating educational content was a way to learn. And I found that to be very valuable. But more than anything else, I had a mission. And so a lot of people on social media, which I guess you could call influencers, vloggers, streamers, a lot of them are showing lifestyle. They're showing how they live. They are doing things that are entertaining generally. And entertainment for the sake of entertainment is fine. That's a fine mission. But what I felt was something much deeper than that. I didn't just want to be on YouTube to teach people about AI. I had a goal from the very start. And that goal was to make sure that as a society, we can create artificial intelligence that would be maximally beneficial to every human on Earth. Because I saw a trajectory of this technology getting better and better over time. And I also saw the centralization of this technology into a few key powers. And I felt like the way to prevent any kind of, apocalyptic scenario where, AI is manipulating people and taking advantage of them and exploiting them, the way to get around that would be to make sure that as many people as possible understood how this technology worked. And so I was just watching Eric Schmidt on Lex Friedman's podcast. And one thing that he said that really stuck out to me was that everybody has a 6-month plan or a 1-year plan, but nobody has a 5-year plan. And that's what made Eric Schmidt, to quote Larry Page, the adult in the room when he got hired to be Google's CEO. And that's probably a huge reason as to why Google was so successful, because they were looking so far ahead. And for me, that was inspiring. And just the idea of planning ahead. So from the start, I wasn't just, obviously I was making videos that were funny, that were entertaining. I was kind of like this jester kind of figure. But it was never about me. It was about the technology. And I considered myself to just be a vessel, a martyr. I can be that person because it's not about me. It's about the technology and about the mission. So my 5-year plan was to win the hearts and minds of 10 million developers, so that I could transition the space from, at the time, what it was mostly web app development, mobile app development. It wasn't focused on AI. And I wanted to change the directive of the developer community and have it focus more on, instead of sequential programming, on learning. And so that's a paradigm shift of thinking about software development in terms of learning. And instead of giving a machine steps to do something, the instructions, you give it the end goal, the result, and it will learn the steps to get there. And that's basically, it's been a 3-year journey to do that. And I'm not even 10% of the way where I want to be, but it's definitely been a lot of work. So that's a little bit of context as to why I started making educational content. And I've been doing it full time now for 3 years. YouTube has, so now let me talk about platforms. So YouTube has been my primary platform to do this. I make these educational videos, and each video takes around 25 to maybe 35 hours of work to do. And when I started, I was doing all of the editing myself. I was doing everything myself. And it was a lot of work. I learned a lot about editing, and I didn't know how to use a lot of these tools. I also just didn't understand audience sentiment as well as I do now, because I have a very data-driven approach to content creation. I'm not just creating content, I'm looking at feedback. I'm looking at audience feedback. I'm reading every single comment. I'm looking at the likes and dislikes ratio. I'm tailoring my content to be maximally beneficial to the most amount of people. And I'm preaching to the crowd here, but being data-driven, not just in programming, but in content creation, is very important. So that's something. So YouTube has been my primary platform, but I've also been using Twitter and LinkedIn and Slack and Facebook and GitHub as well. Many people don't understand that GitHub is actually a social network. There are 30 million now developers that live on GitHub. And you can follow developers. And so now I have a good amount of followers, which is awesome, because the code that I write, I'm meticulously making sure that the code that it works. Now, I'm not perfect, obviously. I have 429 repositories on GitHub, and I'm always balancing quality versus quantity. It's not like a solved problem for me, but the goal is to make sure that a developer can just download that code and run it, and it just works. And if it works, then they can start to build off of it. They can get some ideas. They can get better at it. But that's kind of been some of the practice that I've learned from Twilio about code design and how to make sure that it works for beginners. So GitHub has been a platform, but YouTube has been my main platform. When it comes to other platforms, I use them primarily to promote my existing YouTube content. Now Instagram as well, which is a newer one. There are some cases where I am repurposing my YouTube content for other platforms. So Instagram would be one example. It's been quite a challenge to learn Instagram. It's not exactly the most educational medium on the planet, but I'm still learning there. But what I've found is that using it as a feeder into YouTube I've been successful with that, and taking clips of that content that are, bite-sized and using that as a teaser. That's been very good for Instagram. So what else can I talk about here? LinkedIn. So I feel like a lot of people don't recognize the power of LinkedIn as a platform for promotion, self-promotion. So the thing about LinkedIn is, as opposed to other platforms, it's very important to use keywords. It's very important to use hashtags in particular, because LinkedIn really promotes that. And there's this, they might have fixed it by now, but there's this hack in the LinkedIn algorithm where if you make a post and it requires the user to click on read more rather than being a shorter post, LinkedIn will promote that more. So there's all these little social media tricks that you can learn over time, either by doing it or by looking it up. There are many Medium blog posts on this. But I think more than anything else, consistency has been the key. Just being consistent with creating content, with just being consistent. I mean, it's definitely been very hard to do. I mean, everybody's job here is very hard, no matter what you're doing, whether you're doing full-time software development, back-end testing, all of this stuff is hard. But putting yourself out there for sure is hard. Putting your face out there, putting your name out there, and not just putting your face and name out there, but attaching your work to your name and face. is very hard because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. There's imposter syndrome, which I've definitely felt a lot of at several times. I mean, if you think about it, this field it's filled with PhDs, which I love, I respect. You know, I admire that. It just wasn't the path for me. So for me to come into the space without that credential in particular, that's just a recipe for imposter syndrome, right? So, but I was trying to prove a point that you don't necessarily need a PhD to implement this technology. And I think that point has been proven, but now the next point is to prove that you don't necessarily need a PhD to do research. So with School of AI, we're trying to grow the amateur research community. In terms of social media promotion, on that end, now I'm promoting not just my own brand, but the School of AI brand. And so to segment my attention in that way has been quite a challenge. But what I found is that it's better for now for me to promote my own brand because that's where all of the attention is as of now. And what I'm basically a conduit for School of AI. Every word I type, every tweet, every video, not just reflects on me, but reflects on the community. So it's quite a responsibility, and I don't take it lightly. So to summarize, consistency is key to content creation. The second point is to be data-driven about that content creation. So look at the feedback, take it in the chin. Yes, get hurt, because of course it's going to happen. Allow yourself to get hurt. Allow yourself to feel these emotions, but let them sit with you and learn from them, right? Everything is a learning experience. So data-driven content creation, consistency. And the third point is to have a mission. Have a mission that's more than just about promoting yourself or promoting, a specific tool. It should be something deeper and more meaningful than that, something that will last you through these hard times. And the last point is to have fun, because this is hard for sure. And if you're not having fun, then you're not gonna stick through, because you got to be having fun, whatever it is. It's definitely full-time content creation, especially developer education, is a lot of work, and you got to have fun. So those are my four tips for this live stream. Thank you guys for listening. And now I'm going to hand it off to Rachel.
Hi. I made slides because my mind is just empty these days. No, it's too full and things are falling out. So if I don't write down what I'm going to say, I will forget. All right. I'm Rachel. If you've been tuning into the morning sessions, you might know me. You might have seen me on Kaggle. And I want to tell you a little bit of background about me. My background is pretty different from Siraj's. So I do have a PhD. I don't know how much I use it in my day-to-day work, but I do have a very fancy piece of paper that's on my wall. And every so often I look at it and was like, it's 5 years. And my PhD is in linguistics, specifically NLP, computational linguistics, so more on the computational side. And during grad school, I became more and more computational. And by the time I left, I was, ready to be a data scientist. And before that, I was an undergraduate student, also in linguistics. You might notice a theme. And in undergrad, I decided that what I really wanted to be when I grew up was a popular science communicator about linguistics. So sort of like your Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, not Bill Nye, because he's not a scientist in a specific discipline that he talks about. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And I started a blog, and I started on Twitter, and I posted, blog posts about, sort of intro linguistics things. And I sort of kept that up kind of as I went through grad school. And I also started talking more and more about NLP and data science and the things that I was becoming more interested in. And I slowly, really slowly, started to grow a following. So I don't actually know how many Twitter users I had before March 2017, because I didn't write it down. The Twitter data only goes back 3 months. And this happens to be the first time where somebody archived my Twitter profile on the Wayback Machine. And in March 2017, I had 1,200 Twitter followers. And in March of 2019, on the same date, I had 1,100 followers. And that was in big part due to the fact that I started working at Kaggle, and I had time to create more content and reach out to people, and continued to interact with the community on there. And I've also made a lot of really dumb mistakes. And I wasn't, so Suraj talked about being super intentional with branding, with vision, like knowing the story that you want to tell, knowing what you want to do, and then doing it. I did not do that. I had sort of if you like scroll way back in my Twitter feed, at some point it's like, I saw a rabbit today, here's a picture, going to class, sure love the building the class is in, or something. It's just more slice of life. And then as it became more of a professional platform for me, I was like, oh, I should think about what I'm posting and how that reflects on me personally and how that might help me get a job. And I did actually find this job, my Kaggle job, through Twitter, because I met somebody at a conference and then he was like, oh, you should follow one of my advisees who graduated. And I did. And that was Meg Risdal, who has since left Kaggle for Stack Overflow. Hi, Meg, if you're watching. And she posted about this job and she was like, hey, we're looking for people. Seattle is one of the cities you could be in. And I was like, I'm in Seattle, I'm a data scientist. So it was this sort of very organic connection I made just through meeting people at conferences and following them on Twitter and building a network. And also this is the picture I use of me on literally every platform. And I think it looks like me. I know the lighting's kind of bad in here. So what is personal branding? I think Siraj gave a really good introduction. The way that I think about it is, what is your public image? When people think about you, what do they think about? And even if you haven't considered your personal brand, you already have one, right? And you can't necessarily control it. You can't control what other people think about you, but you do have a lot of influence over it. So in my early days of Twitter and blogging, my personal brand that I was trying to develop was like, hey, linguistics, popular science, yay. And at this point, it's more like data science, but also I want to cover technical content in detail. I really want to spend time working through math and help other people do that same thing. So you can sort of think about some people that you might know in the online space. And I spent some time and I just thought about like 3 people. So Cher, she's really active on Twitter. She uses a lot of emoji and she talks about politics a lot. And that's how I think of Cher's online presence and her personal brand. Suraj, machine learning expert, but makes it fun, right? Suraj's videos are really like slick and well put together. And I expect sort of more of a produced experience. Andrew Ng, machine learning expert, educator, maybe a little bit dry. I think we've all at least peaked at the machine learning course, but very sound technical content. And this, I just included a picture of a brand. So those of you, depending on your sort of comfort with English, a brand is like the original use of it was like a stick that was on fire that you could use to like mark things. And then they added branding iron. So these are really popular in the American West to brand cattle or livestock, so you know who it belongs to. And it's sort of very recognizable. It's like, oh, I associate this goat or whatever with this person. So some etymology. Got to bring the linguistics in. And I'm actually going to have you guys do a quick exercise. I have a timer. Nope, that one's for 10 minutes. I actually want one for 20 seconds. I want you guys to spend 20 seconds. I'm going to start the timer, and I'm going to sit here and stare at you. And write what you want to be known for. What do you want your personal brand to be? So that could be, you're really good at writing code and it's very easy to use, and that's what you want people to think about when they think about you. Or maybe you're a researcher and you work on optimization and that's what you want people to think about. Or maybe you make a lot of memes and you want people to think about you as like, oh, the funny machine learning meme person. So 20 seconds, take some time, notepad, on your phone, wherever. Write down what you want to be known for. Starting now. It is up. All right, that was 20 seconds. And hopefully you have a little list of things, or maybe one big thing that you want to focus your brand around. So once you have an idea of what you want your brand to be, what do you do with it? So for me, I think about my personal brand as a filter. So to help me choose what I want to share online on whatever platform I'm using, I'm going to talk most about Twitter because that's where I'm most active, but Suraj mentioned LinkedIn, Instagram. I know a lot of people use WeChat, Slack, so wherever it is that you're sharing content online. So my brand, I mentioned, used to be like linguistics, but make it fun. And these days, I would define it as folksy, non-trivial data science. So it's not super slick. A lot of my stuff isn't super produced. These slides that are just like black text on a white background is sort of the Rachael visual brand. Non-trivial, I talk about the math. I really want to make sure we understand what's going on in the code, and I will take a long time to do that if necessary. And then data science is sort of the general topic. So having this in mind, it lets me prioritize my time. So Suraj's videos are beautiful. He mentioned it takes like 30 hours to edit a video. I don't edit my live stream videos because it's still on brand for me if it's a live stream and it's just recorded and people can watch it back. I would call maybe homespun or informal is how I would talk about my sort of visual brand identity, if you will. And also it helps me decide what to share. So I have a lot of linguistics friends. I still keep up with the linguistics literature. A lot of my followers do not care if Chomsky's trying to add a new, operation to minimalism. That's probably like absolute nonsense to most of you. So even if that's happening and it's sort of interesting and my community is talking about it, I'm probably not going to share it because it's not on brand for my online presence, if that makes sense. I am on a lot of online communities, and I've also done a lot of research on sort of social communities in my dark days as a researcher. Not dark days, but I don't really do that anymore. And I sort of think of a taxonomy of ways of being in an online community, whatever that community is. So consumers or lurkers are people who go to a community, receive content, maybe you upvote some things, you like some things, but you don't produce a lot of content. Maybe you don't tweet if you're on Twitter. And this is the type of account where if you have an account like this on a particular platform, you're probably not going to be building your brand there. You're just sort of going to be receiving things. So this is kind of how I use like Facebook. Like I look at pictures of people's dogs, but I don't post a whole lot. And then there's aggregators. So these are people who find useful resources and share it. If you are trying to think about being an aggregator, I encourage you to really think about what's the most useful or most novel thing you could share. There's like, a quadrillion people who have shared various data science cheat sheets on Twitter, and they're not all necessarily going to be useful for everybody. And if I, see someone who's posted like 6 more all in a row, I might unfollow them because that's not super useful for me right now. And I'd say no more than 2 to 3 retweets a day if this is the sort of thing that you're focusing on. And this will help you grow your brand, but not as much as being a producer. So producers create new content. So you might produce YouTube videos like Siraj, or I'm not writing a whole lot of blog posts these days, but every so often I will. I write a lot of tutorials. I'm not really writing research papers, but whatever it is that you're producing, new things that you're writing or creating or filming, or maybe you're doing a blog, podcast, that's what I'm thinking. So you have voice recordings. Whatever that is, when you're making new content, I would call you a producer. And those are the people that I'm most likely to follow and the people who are doing the most to build their brand online. I know that not everybody has time to like record a podcast in the evenings because maybe you have 4 children and a full-time job and that's enough. And that's absolutely fine. I think this is just a helpful way to think about being a member of a community and how you fit into each of the communities that you're a part of. And finally, I have a good tweet and a bad tweet just to talk about. I made a fake tweet just to give you an example of people who are producing content or aggregating content, how you can maybe do a better job. So this tweet here, looking for hashtag ideas for hashtag projects to work on in hashtag data science. Help, please. This is a fake tweet. I made it up. But if I saw someone and this was in a tweet that they tweeted, probably I wouldn't follow this account. So one thing is that it doesn't really follow the norms of the specific platform that it's written on. So in Twitter, especially in technical and machine learning Twitter, people don't generally use a lot of hashtags. Siraj mentions that on Instagram, people do use a lot of hashtags. So if I made an Instagram post with no hashtags, people might look at it and be like, oh, she doesn't really know what she's doing on Instagram. She's not Instagram, sorry, LinkedIn. Those are both LinkedIn. She doesn't really know what she's doing. She's not a good member of this community. She hasn't taken the time to learn the norms, and people might be less willing to interact with me. Also, for me, as someone just interacting with this, it's not going to add much value to my Twitter feed. I mean, I guess sometimes I have projects that I was like, oh, it'd be cool if somebody did that. But I don't really have like a lot of ideas just sitting around that I can, whipped up. And even if I did, this wouldn't necessarily be the best way for me to share them. Like if I was just like, hey, random person, I'm going to reply to you. And I definitely talk back and forth with people on Twitter. I'm not saying never ask for help, but this doesn't necessarily drive me to interact with this person. And it's also really focusing on what this person wants and not supporting the community. So sort of a different example. This is a real tweet. It's by data science Renee. And Renee is also asking for something. So she says, reply with your favorite recently published books. I'm curious too. CC Hunter Owens. And this is a quote tweet. And the tweet she's quoting says, what books / resources, etc., should be on a getting started with Python or R for data science list. I realize all my resources are 3+ years old now. So she's asking for something. She's asking for recommendations of recently published data science literature, but she's doing it in a way that helps the community as a whole. She's curious. She's helping somebody out. There are some replies that people are talking about things that have been recently published, so that's useful for me. And this seems like an account I do want to follow, and I do follow Renee. She's great. Because she is providing use for me as someone who's interacting with her. And also, not all of her tweets are like this. So she recently hosted a conference and she posted a bunch of slides and talked about what was going on in the conference. And I learned a lot of cool things from there. So I think that's my last slide. Oh, nope, I have one more slide with the review. So just to review, personal brand, how you are perceived online. You have some control over it, especially with what you choose to share. The more you do to support the communities that you're in, the more likely you are to build an audience in that community. So Suraj produces a lot of helpful videos in a space where there weren't a lot to begin with, and that does a lot to support the community. Like I watch his videos, I'm sure many of you have as well. And just a final note, I know I mentioned some numbers in here, like numbers of followers. I wouldn't recommend stressing about this unless it's part of your job. So Suraj is a content creator and that's his job, so clearly he cares about number of subs. But if you're just interacting with people to learn things, to make connections, I wouldn't necessarily focus on it. And also follower distribution on most platforms is highly, highly skewed. It's like the, it's the statistical paradox where all your friends have more friends than you do. Rich get richer? I think it's rich get richer. Anyway, more than 95% of Twitter accounts have less than 500 followers. So don't be like, unless I have 1,000 followers, I'm not a real Twitter. It's fine. The thing that's really important is building connections, making friends, learning new things, being part of a community. And it's those organic connections that, at least for me, have been the most valuable. So that's what I have to say about branding. I'll stop sharing my screen now. And I think either Jessica or Mark was going to hop in here. I should have checked my notes. I'm sorry.
Hi all, I am here, but I am trying to start my video.
You're invisible.
There we go, no longer invisible. Hi everybody. Thanks to both of you for all of your great points. I personally really enjoyed the perspectives that you both came with, especially since you both come from such different backgrounds, but have really both like figured out your unique, prominent brand, and it works. You know, I think a key theme I learned from both of you is that there is no right brand, that there is just yours. So figuring out what your brand is and how you want to behave and position yourself within all the social media platforms that are out there today has proven to be very effective and a healthy career move for both of you. So with that, let's take a look at some of the questions from the audience. Our first question is from Timothy Yee. Timothy asks, Siraj, as somebody who hasn't had a full-time job in industry since doing YouTube full-time, how successful would you say your brand is now? And how many say like, either people in industry or recruiters might have reached out to recognize the work that you've done?
Great question. Thanks, Tim. So it's endless, like hundreds a day. Yeah, so I'm constant. 98% of my engagement is just no, 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 no. I just want to keep making content, and then sometimes I'll say yes if it's like Kaggle, or if it's NVIDIA, or if it's Intel, but I'm usually saying no. So yeah, like I don't even know how to. The delta between where I was 3 years ago and now is so vast. It's not even. I can't even imagine. It's very different. So my point of saying that is not to brag, but to show that if you make something that's quality and that's in demand, that the intersection of those two things, they will come. If you build it, they will come.
Great. And Timothy also has a bit of a follow-up question to that. So in terms of getting our name out there, like a place to start from, do you have any recommendations for a good platform to start? For example, creating blogs on Medium, creating a YouTube channel, or first stick with portfolio projects and uploading on GitHub?
Definitely make content in general, like as both a learning tool for yourself and to promote yourself. And I say this to my wizards, the people who follow my YouTube channel. Not creating a portfolio isn't just about creating GitHub repositories. You have to sell those repositories, and you have to communicate the product to people who aren't necessarily technical. So making blog posts on Medium is a great way to start, because the production requirements are lower than it would be a video or podcasts these days. We are now entering the golden age of audio, and podcasts are everywhere. And I haven't jumped on this trend yet, but we'll see how that goes. Right now, I'm very much enjoying YouTube as a platform, because a skill that I have in particular is presenting visually. And whatever your skill is, maybe you're better suited to just write, or maybe it's to perform. Find out what that skill is, that innate skill is, and then just pick one and just go. And then from there, you can branch out later. But just pick a platform and just roll with it. Rapid experimentation, one of my values.
Yeah, really good point there. A lot of these platforms do hone in slightly different skills, and depending on what you're interested in or what you're really skilled in, perhaps one is better to start before you add more. And next to our MVP attendee who has been here asking questions the entire day. Thank you so much for being here, Lucy Tan. How do you balance learning with creating content when a lot of what we learn is already out there from tons of other resources? And feel free to, this question is open to both of you, so feel free to, whoever wants to speak first can.
Suraj?
All right. Yeah. So how do I handle learning? I have to learn a lot really fast. I have to learn a lot of very advanced concepts that I'm not familiar with very fast. And right now I'm spoiler alert, making a video on things that I'm not familiar with related to React.js and to different web development components I haven't necessarily built myself. And the way I'm learning all this really fast is to watch these videos at 3x speed. And I keep saying this, and a lot of people don't believe it, but it's like lifting weights. To start off, it's going to be hard, but you just continually increase that speed 0.25, 0.25, and your brain will adapt to that level of information processing. And so I'm watching a lot of tutorials. I am reading a lot of blog posts. I'm synthesizing a lot from across the web, and I'm building as well. And I like to call it frustrated programming. Of doesn't work, but that you feel frustrated and you keep trying it, but that's the learning process. It's like Olympic athletes are so used to the pain when it comes to training their muscles. We as learning athletes need to learn to adapt to the pain of learning, of not knowing a concept, and to not just embrace it, but to almost enjoy it in a weird, I guess you could say, masochistic way, because in the end that you're going to get something out of it. So deal with the pain, and just keep learning.
My general process is a little bit more scattershot. So in the morning, I spend a good between 30 minutes and an hour catching up on Twitter. And I am pretty selective about who I follow on Twitter these days. And I try to make it a good mix of NLP researchers, because that's my area of expertise. So I do want to I want to know what's going on in NLP, and also sort of data science practitioners, and also just some random folks, because I like to keep it a little vibrant. So seeing what the community is talking about is very important for me, and then that tells me what I should spend my sort of limited time that I have to read papers and look at source code on. The other thing that I do that's it's for you guys, but it's also for me, is we have the Kaggle Reading Club, which is where I sit and read a paper aloud every Wednesday, except not this Wednesday because I was doing something else. And it's more interesting than it sounds, maybe, depending on how interesting you think that sounds. And having the forcing function of there are other people who also want to know this, so I do have to sit down and do the reading because they're going to be there, is very motivating for me. As for how I pick papers, mostly I pick papers that I think are currently the most important in the field, and the field that I know the most about is NLP, so they tend to be NLP papers. So we read the Viswani Transformer paper, we read the BERT paper, we read the GPT-2 paper, and things that are the community has sort of picked up. So deciding what to learn, I use my community and my network as a filter function. I'm not just on archive every morning. Making time to learn, I try to do it efficiently, so I'm doing something else. If you're working in a full-time job and you're working on projects and you have a little bit of flexibility, ask for a project where you're going to have a little bit of learning as part of it, if that's something that you can do. So maybe people are having you maybe you're currently working as a software engineer and you're implementing something, and maybe you can ask if you have the ability to add a little bit of machine learning to that. Or if you're sort of creating data, say, hey, can I build a data pipeline for this to send this to our data science team? So trying to be efficient and incorporate learning into your work as much as possible.
Very insightful. On the topic of learning and sort of continually learning as you make content, Johnny McGregor wonders, do you both attend data science or machine learning conferences? If so, what are some of your favorites?
Yeah, I do. I'm maybe too many. So probably my favorite conferences to go to just in terms of learning and research are the ACL conferences. ACL is the Association of Computational Linguistics, so it's the big research organization for NLP. And there's NACL, which is the North American one. There's ACL, which is the global one. EACL, which is the European one. There's one in, it's like PAXIL. Anyway, there's one in the Pacific. So those are sort of the research conferences that I'm most interested in. For pure machine learning research, ICML is a big one. CVPR, I think, is more of a computer vision one. But those are for researchers who are developing new algorithms. For learning more from a practitioner side, I really like the Python conferences. So for data science specifically, PyData is very good. The PyCons and the regional PyCons tend to be more general because Python is a more general language. So you're going to get a lot of app development and web and front end and back end that may not be as relevant to you there as well. But there is data science at the PyCon. I'll be at PyCon. And then for R, the RStudio conference is very, very good. Use R, which travels around, is also very good. And all of the R conferences are very data science focused because that's what R is for. Do you have other favorites, Suraj?
I think, and I'm always changing on this, I'm always adapting. I think right now, today, I don't have a desire to go to any conferences. Because the most recent one I went to was NVIDIA's GTC in San Jose. Great conference because I like NVIDIA, but overall, an amazing talks as well. The problem is that I'm so used to watching things at 3x speed. Similar reason why I dropped out of Columbia, because I always fell asleep in class because I was always, probably ADHD, whatever you have, whatever it is, but my attention span is so limited that if I do go to conferences, it's party, and that's really it, or speak. But not even that, just to meet people and have fun, But
the hallway track.
The hallway track, exactly.
That's very real. That's very much a track.
It's a track, yeah. And in terms of if I were going to go to another conference, probably, School of AI is going to have something, but that's it really.
Oh, Kaggle Days is also very good. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I should have plugged Kaggle Days.
About that. Yeah. Kaggle Days is a good conference. That was cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, a lot of different sort of like conferences, but also I would say like developer and data science meetups these days. And I feel like that's sort of what both of you were alluding to. There's a lot of different reasons to go to these conferences. For Rachel, it might be to get up to speed with like the state of the art NLP techniques, or for Suraj, it might be more to meet like newer figures in the field and really, as we say, the hallway track. And sometimes I find myself at conferences as well, doing one or the other. And it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive depending on the situation. And so I think getting those names just now from both of you of the kinds of places you go to and conferences you go to, that's really helpful. Cool. And then on the topic of sort of communities, a user wonders, should I focus on international communities or local? And I think the motivation for this question is two communities with different languages can make it very different, and also depending on where you want to be or where you're going to, that could also be some of the motivation for this question context.
Yeah, I'd say it depends on what your goals are. I am in the very privileged position of having my native language also be sort of the lingua franca of academia and research, which is to say English. There is absolutely a lot of value to creating content or even with permission translating content into different languages. I don't want to be like English only, English is the best. You might get a wider audience, but especially if you're looking to build a local community, let's say I'm trying to think of a country where English isn't like a major matrix language. I keep coming up with examples like Nigeria and Bangladesh, where a lot of people speak English. Japan, there we go. There's a really big Kaggle community in Japan. There's a really big machine learning community in Japan. And there's a lot of Japanese language content and community building that goes on in Japanese there. And if you're in Japan, get in on it, make some friends. That was not an answer. That was just me talking about languages. It was an answer. It wasn't a good answer.
Oh, I think you point to an interesting phenomenon, Rachel. That is that, on Twitter, we have a data science community, but oftentimes our data science community is very much separated by different kinds of languages. And I feel like if I were in Japan and somehow knew Japanese, it would be a lot more relevant for me to try. I would want to really meet people locally, as opposed to just trying to cater to a larger audience. Maybe that would be a later incentive, but maybe not first.
Yeah, so I would add to that for sure. Like international is the way to go. There's a lot of undervalued attention out there that I can see because I have the data of people who watch my content. And they exist in Brazil, and they exist in India, and they exist in Nigeria, and they exist in a lot of countries that, yeah, they're not, not necessarily English speaking, but they are undervalued and they're all coming up very fast. And the job market is global, and talent is distributed, and talent is global. And I think this is something about the industry in particular, our industry of data science and machine learning, is that it still hasn't become, accessible to enough people, I think. And I'm not perfect here. I'm trying to become more accessible as well. But we have to be speaking to a global audience because the world is globalizing, and that's just the future. Like we're all one big internet village. So, in terms of language translation, I use transcription services like Rev to make sure that it's applicable to a lot of different languages. But I make sure to give like all sorts of little like cultural shout outs to people, like whether it's in, anime culture or, Indian culture, or, I speak some Spanish sometimes, but it's just so people know, like, I know what it is like in terms of culture. Like, I feel you, it's not just America, it's the world. So.
Yeah, and I love being in data science personally for that same reason as well. Everybody is speaking, when it comes to ML, we're speaking the same techniques, even if they may be in different languages. Great. Well, We have one last question from Kelly Wang. Kelly asks, you're both seasoned content curators now, but what was it like when you first started? Were there big challenges or mindsets you had to overcome? Any advice for people that are kind of daunted by the thought of content creation?
It's okay to teach people things you just learned. So when I started, I was like, all right, I'm talking about linguistics. I can only talk about the things that I know from every angle. And that's especially for technical content. Sometimes the people who have just learned how to do something are the best teachers and content creators around it, because you've just done the work of figuring it out and being like, okay, this thing is like this other thing that I know because I trained ponies or whatever, and building those connections, those allegories, and then being able to take the work that you've done to understand something and immediately create content from that. Absolutely fine.
What do you think, Suraj?
In terms of content,
Any big challenges that you personally had to overcome when you first started, perhaps more mentally, as well as some advice for those that may be a little daunted by the fact?
totally. Like when you start off, you're gonna suck for sure, like I did. And it's always a work in progress. And I'm still trying to improve my skills in terms of content creation. And I remember when I posted one of my first videos to the machine learning subreddit, the top comment was like, "Never post here again." Like, it's a nice little thing, but like, never post here again. One of my closest friends at the time, sat me down. He's like, "This is a project. Like, you have a good job here at Twilio. Don't do this." And so a lot of times people can't sometimes you just have to trust your instinct. And if you have intuition and it's backed by data, not everybody can have that insight. So you just have to trust yourself sometimes. And it all comes back to having that mission. If you have that mission, it doesn't matter how hard it is or how many haters there are. You just keep going.
Really inspiring note there. I just started my Twitter, so now I'm inspired to become the next big Twitter person. Any final remarks or advice you might both have for our CareerCon audience here?
I'd say in general, when you are putting stuff out on the internet, my personal best litmus test is, would I want to receive this content? Is this something I would be interested to see? So just a little thing to take in your pocket.
Absolutely. And I think future literacy is a really important skill for us as data scientists to have, to really practice looking ahead, not just a year or 5 years, but 20 years, because reality is changing so fast and we're moving into an age where the absurd becomes normal, and technology is the medium of making this reality happen, and it's accelerating. The advent of these algorithms are all compounding in their impact on global society. So it's important to be future literate by understanding how not just current technology works, but extrapolating to where it could be. And if you do that, you'll be a step ahead of the curve, because future literacy is an important job skill, not just in data science, but in general. So it's a part of being successful, being able to predict where things are going. And I think one of my friends just shared something on Twitter about how most CEOs are not future literate, and that's the reason that these big companies are not doing as well as they could be. But a lot of the youth, just by definition, being more internet native are, but this can apply to anybody of any age. And it's just a mindset. So try to be future literate.
Great. Well, with that, I believe that is a wrap on both Siraj and Rachel's session. Thank you both, Siraj and Rachel, for volunteering your time to be here today, obviously. And thanks to everyone else for tuning in. Siraj and Rachel will be heading to the CareerCon Slack channel now to answer more of your questions. So feel free to direct your questions to them there. And join us again very shortly at 2 p.m. PST for the final session of the day with one of the biggest names in AI and ML, Jeff Dean. See you there.